All right, you're good.
Are we in the green room? Awesome. Wow, by myself too. I did one of these, Tiffany's behind the computer back there. I did one of these when Ruta, who's out today, guys. She's okay. She's healthy. She's got a couple things to do. Really busy week. We had the dancers last weekend, Lithuanian dancers. They were awesome. Second show coming up in Hollywood. Anyway, you can't not do green rooms right now. Too much going on, Amendment 3 and everything else. I've invited Gary Stein to come in with me, and I think he'll wake up and join me. Oh, he says he is here. Tiff, check it. Let's see if that would be the case. And that'd be great because Gary is like OG, Canna Warrior.
Nope, he's not showing us in there.
Okay, I don't know. We just sent another invitation to Gary. Anyway, we'll get him. But I wanted to get, Karen Goldstein in last week, and I wanted to get Gary in this week because there's so much misinformation out there, about what's going on with Amendment 3 and the legal adult use of cannabis, constitutional amendments. So we don't differ here. I'll give you my phone. That way you can communicate back and forth with Gary while we get him. Anyway, and listen, carrying the show myself is like a half hour worth of therapy. And I can surely do that. But Gary is such a wealth of information and knowledge. I want to give a big shout out to the show that he does on Sundays with Carlos Hermida and Chris Cano, which is The Rotation on the Suncoast Normal page. And I'll be honest with you, it's a source of information for me. And I listen to it every Sunday. They had a special guest on Monday who was actually the lawyer who argued Amendment 3 in front of the Supreme Court of Florida. And I missed that show. And I wanted to hear what Gary had to say about that also. But anyway, here's the deal, everybody. So here in Florida, and it's interesting, most of you know I'm from Ohio. And, Ohio went through this legal adult use debate and vote in November, actually, of this past year. They don't have the 60% rule that we have here in Florida for constitutional amendments. So they passed their constitutional amendment that actually included a home grow option. Great. Gary will be coming in. And that was back in November. And here we are in April. And they still don't have their, legal adult use sales system set up yet in Ohio. So it's very interesting. And I've spoken, to the extent of Ohio being kind of a prequel to what we're going to see here in Florida. I guess sequel is what, why can I can't think of any movies this morning, that would have like 8 different afters. But a prequel, of course, comes before, and they've made movies about that too. But that's kind of what's going on in Ohio now. And I think one of the things misinformation wise that I actually had is misinformation. It's interesting. And I kind of caught this last night in our, we have doctor meetings, everybody, every third Wednesday. We had one last night. Why would the doctors meet? Well, of course the doctors are meeting. The doctors are, some very concerned about legal adult use, their effect on their practice, on their quote unquote business. I've known that illegal adult use would be coming to Florida forever. It's kind of been a philosophy of mine to try to keep things small and simple and keep it as a doctor's office. But now we'll get them. But we had, in the doctor group last night, and we meet, we talk about policy, we talk about how we can influence. We know that it's about safety and patient education, no matter what venue, right, that you're getting your cannabis. But Aaron Bloom, and I'll give him a shout out on it. He's an attorney, runs Doc MJ, good guy. He speaks to this, and as an attorney, he reads things, appropriately. So what the constitutional amendment actually does is it gives a 6-month period of time in implementation here in Florida. And that's it. If they don't implement some kind of regulatory system within that 6 months, then theoretically the MMTCs can start to sell legal adult use flower on 6-month day one without any particular regulatory authority. So it's interesting, and I think that may preclude what's going on for what's going on in Ohio happening in Florida. That I don't think we'll have that period of time where they can really, play it out. Interestingly enough, if our vote is in November, and it is, the legislative session of next year will be a late session because this year was an early session. So that's a March through May. So if you look at when the vote is on November 5th, that would take it to May 5th as the 6 months. And I think it would literally be like right at the end of the legislative session. So it's going to be a really interesting period of time. But I think that's one thing, and I will call myself guilty of, talking about that misinformation perhaps, because listen, when I talk to patients, I try to give them the appropriate expectation about what it is. There he is. Hi, Gary. There he is, guys, Gary Stein, and I'll introduce him in a moment. But, the point is I try to give patients appropriate expectations about what we're going to see in legal adult use. And Gary Stein, welcome. I think you would agree with me at this point in time. Tons of speculation. There's certain things we know, but there's surely more that we don't know. So everybody listen, Gary Stein, longtime OG Canna warrior, and I will say a mentor to me. And I thank Gary, for helping me kind of get into the Florida space. Fraternity brother of mine, albeit Michigan State, but Sigma Alpha Mu, as it is. But Gary's been here. He's the bill writer. He's seen all this develop. And that's why I wanted to have you in this morning, Gary. I do want to give a shout out, and I gave one before you got on, but I want to give another one. Your show, The Rotation, with Carlos and Hermida and Chris Cano on Sundays, at usually 10:30, 10:45, whatever you do. It is a great source of information. And that's why I wanted to steal you for a week and get you into the green room, because the misinformation that's out there. So welcome, Gary. Great to have you this morning. Thanks.
Is my mic working okay?
Yeah, you're good. Yep.
All right, thanks a lot. Yeah, it's an interesting time, and we have really evolved since I first got involved in this back in 2012, when the whole concept of cannabis was unspoken and unheard of in Tallahassee.
That's the great news.
Ran.
Absolutely. No matter where we're at, or no matter what your opinion is, there's no doubt that there's been a significant positive evolution, and that's nationwide, of course. And, here in Florida, I've been here 9 years myself. And that's why I give deference to you guys who really laid the groundwork. And, so what I was just talking about, Gary, because, of course, Ohio went through this, passed with 58% back in November. We need 60%, of course.
Yeah.
Everybody assumes it's going to pass, and, you'll give me your opinion. It's going to be a pretty bitter campaign, to that extent. But would you agree that what this constitutional amendment allows is literally the MMTCs and whoever else they authorize to sell legal adult use product on 6 month day one, no matter what they do as far as regulation, correct?
That's right. And
so we'd have an advantage over Ohio to that extent, because Ohio's still muddling along up there, I don't think with any particular time frame. And we all know the story of New York, which has been a complete disaster, with their legal adult use system, which really hasn't ever had a good rollout.
Well, New York, I mean, one advantage they have is they actually have a state government that's actually in favor of this, as far as an industry working within their state. Their problem is that they're having a hard time getting the whole implementation right. They're having problems with social equity issues and things of that sort. Here in Florida, they just ignore all those issues, and so therefore they don't become one. And we've always had problems within our executive branch, and up until this point, the judicial branch as well as just moving this forward. And so you really have to get all the parties involved to be on the same page, but that page never seems to flip to the same one for everybody.
Yeah, and listen, elections matter. And I was going to leave this till the end, but we'll probably say it again at the end. But listen, with all of this, all the seats are up, for election, all the House seats. Isn't it all the House seats, or is it all the Senate seats and almost all of the House seats, I think is what it is. But the point is, these people that will be making the decisions on the implementation will be on the ballot at the same time, as this cannabis, legal adult use bill. it'll be interesting to see if it gets any traction in any debates, any discourse. I think it's going to be a pretty bitter campaign, Gary. You've watched the Florida channel as I have, and you've seen the discussions up there. I think we're going to hear death from cannabis out of the prohibitionists during this campaign. I think they're going to bring up the cardiovascular, very poorly interpreted studies, about cannabis. It's not going to be pretty, and I think just the assumption that it's going to pass here in Florida shouldn't lead anybody to complacency if you really believe and want in the constitutional amendment. We'll get to that in a second. But the point is, I know three groups that are absolutely opposed to it. One's obvious. It's the prohibitionists, of course, and there's a lot of them, and they're running Tallahassee, of course, and they're the supermajority, and they're going to campaign against this. We lost Representative Gregory, who's going to be the president of the State College of Florida or something.
Yeah, there'll be one less smirk at all the big committee meetings as far as that's concerned. He was an unwilling participant.
I labeled him
happens in Tallahassee.
I labeled him the mad capper for a reason, because he said it. He would cap everything. So one less, and maybe we can get somebody positive, in that seat. But the bottom line is, elections matter, and what we know is that so there's three groups I know are going to be against it. The prohibitionists, for sure, we know that. I look for Sam, to come in with Kevin Sabet and that whole bit. We'll see if we can get, what was her name again? What was what was the woman again that came in to speak? The Dr. Bertha Madras.
Bertha Madras, yes.
Is she still alive? I think she is. We know we lost Dr. Mishulam, somebody on our side. But,
yeah.
I'm not praying for anybody to pass, but I think Dr. Bertha Madras is still around. But they're going to campaign against it. We know that. The second group, and I talk to them every day, there are medical patients, Gary, that have come from other states, right, that have seen what's happened in their states when legal adult use has come to their states. And they're concerned about losing their access and losing their products. And maybe Florida's not quite ready yet. I have another cadre of patients, probably a little bit more conservative, that believe everybody should come in and get the same education and take the same responsibility that they did to utilize cannabis, So it's interesting. Not every medical patient, of course, is going to vote for this either. And as we know, and it's why I wanted you in today, and that's the whole big misinformation thing back there. Thanks, Tiff, for a wonderful, another graphic, because the misinformation amongst the advocate community, right? And it's really important today. And I shared this out to a whole bunch of the advocate pages this morning, because there's some simple things that we still continue to see on the advocate page that is going to stand in the way of some people that would obviously support this. Okay. Because listen, everybody, it's Florida. It's slow interval steps here in Florida. We all want what Gary said. New York can't even get together yet, to that extent. Social, and so some states have. Massachusetts, I think, did the expungement thing. Was the last one to do it, I think, here. Or was it New Jersey? Someplace up there. Just this past week, expunged all of it. And we all want that type of stuff. But let's go to the basics. Why no home grow on this, Gary? I've spoken too much. Let's open it to you. It's the easiest of the misinformation streams that leads many an advocate to say, no, I'm not voting for this. We don't get home grow.
Well, the process basically states that after you get approximately 1 million signatures, then it goes to the Supreme Court for approval. And the Supreme Court has a 3-part test to make certain it can be on the ballot. The first one is that it's understood by the voters, and secondly, make sure it's constitutional federally and statewide. And the third one is it must be a single subject. It has to have oneness of purpose, is what they say. And if it's not oneness of purpose, it gets shot down. Now, that said, when we had our Constitutional Revision Committee season a couple of years ago, we had these crazy ballot initiatives that had 2 things on them that were totally unrelated. Like we had, I think it was fracking and vaping on the same one. So you had to vote for both of them, or both of them up or both of them down. But here it is. they say you have to have a single subject, and they are fully in belief that adult use immunity or freedom, whatever you wish to call it, or you can basically smoke it as medical or non-medical, is one subject, and home grow is another. If you put the two of them together into one ballot initiative, it will fail, and
Right.
there will be nothing on the ballot to vote on. Plain
Right.
and simple.
And of course, this isn't the first attempt to get through the Supreme Court, right? Which is why this particular constitutional amendment was written in the way it was. And you know, here we are, it's passed. But and you know, listen, you know, shout out to Mariah Barnhart, you know, who tried, you know, in her own way to, you know, do a home grow initiative. But, you know, for any number of reasons and any number of backstories with no speculation, you know, it didn't happen. And it's a tough, you know, lift here in Florida. But these are the kind of things, Gary, that ultimately can be taken care of in an add-on if we can change the legislature right up there and we can get people that are favorable towards cannabis. Home grow could be an added on later, of course, right? Doesn't have to be done by constitutional amendment, right? That would be fair to say.
Actually, it's true. In fact, I have a bill that I've written that has been pushed out to be filed for the last couple of years. That is an alternative to home grow, where you have people who have co-ops, which are basically areas like, for instance, in one of those containers that you can put in like 10 or 12 growers in there, with all the electricity and all the air conditioning and all the hydroponics put in there, and an expert tutelage to help you grow. And you rent out a space in there with expert tutelage, so you're actually growing a medical grade product and you're not going to fail. And and also it also accomplishes one of the biggest problems they have in Tallahassee, and they are afraid of what is called diversion. Diversion is basically meaning you grow it for yourself, but you pass it out to the neighborhood, which never really happens, because if you need it medically, you're not going to give it out. You're not going to give it out on Halloween. You're not going to give it out because it's harvest season. You just want everybody to have a sample in the neighborhood. The fact is, you grow it for yourself. And this way, they know how many plants you grew, how many plants were successful, and how many plants you harvest. So they know that there's no diversion going on, and they can sleep well at night. And it's
It's always about the children. You know, it's the children, Gary. God forbid somebody would wander into somebody's pool, lanai, or, you know, whatever, and, you know, pick buds off of plants or something, you know. It is. And listen, I thank you for your bills. And, you know, it's one of the frustrating things that we go through here in cannabis space, is that we attempt to work, you know, with the legislators on various easy bills like veterans access, free cards, you know, and parental protections and protections in the workplace. Gary, I say, when you and I have to go into an assisted living or whatever the hell they're going to call it at the time, there better be a bench out there with an ashtray for me. Okay.
Yeah.
No, there's things that need to be codified. We know that, right? And that's why we get frustrated, and why we make no assumptions as to what's going to come out on the other end of the sausage maker. You know, listen, I had Karen in last week, and she did a great green room with me, but she was very, very cautious in not putting out any negatives, okay, as far as what may come out on the other end of the sausage maker. What's the tax going to be, right? Is there even going to be a tax? Well, of course there's going to be a tax. And I was interested that we didn't hear that number being discussed in Dr. Mazzullo's "The people should know what it is that they're voting for." Okay.
Absolutely.
No doubt. And you can look at the other states and what their tax rates are and this and that, you know, and you can surmise where Florida's going to fall. The second thing, and this is in the constitutional amendment, Gary, and I'm interested in your thoughts on this, because I know you talk to people on all sides, you know, all the sandboxes. There is, of course, the 3 ounce, quote unquote, possession limit, right? And the 5 grams of concentrate, right? How are they going to track that, right? We know that a lot of people haven't gotten into the medical program because they don't want to be tracked. They don't want to be on a registry. But when you know, as you know, when you go to Colorado or California, when you go to a dispensary, you got to at least show them your driver's license so they know you're coming into the facility. But is Florida going to go to the extent of tracking that 3-ounce possession limit in the way that they're tracking the medical patient right now with the 2.5 every 35 days?
No, they're not going to. What they're going to do is they're going to use it for arrest limits. Basically, if you are caught in your car with 3 ounces in your car, or wherever they find you when they decide to go ahead and arrest you, that will be the issue that they have to go on, whether or not you have 5 grams or less of concentrate. I see some young ladies who actually walk around with 6 or 7 ounces, 6 or 7 grams rather of concentrate in their purse, even if it's just 6 vape pens.
Well, that's true. Yeah, you can lose track of that, pretty easy. But you don't think they're actually going to try to keep track? So you'd be able to go to one dispensary and buy 3 ounces and then drive to the next dispensary even on the same day and buy 3 more ounces as long as you get home and nobody catches you with 6 ounces. Then you believe that's how it's going to roll. I mean, that would be great for the MMTCs, but what are you going to do about the medical patient? Who's got a limit, at 2.5, ounces, every 35 days. One would think that would have to go away, to that extent. I'll tell you what else, Gary, is interesting is the informed consent. As you know, the informed consent is a garbage. And I hope somebody from the state is watching today. Garbage. Okay. We had a patient, Tiff, confirm this, please, behind the computer, that literally left our office yesterday and did not get into the medical program because they would not sign through the informed consent, right?
Mhm.
So what are they going to do about that? So I mean, there's issues, there's things.
Absolutely. And again, when you open the market to adult use and you have no regulations, then you get into a situation which they should have learned all their lessons in the pill mill situation we had here in Florida, where people would come here from all over the country to doc shop and basically go from doctor to doctor to get as many pain pills as possible and walk out with 1 gram Xanax bars, which have never even been produced in the first place. But the fact is, we were there to allow people to go ahead and buy these things, and they weren't restricted from buying them there was no plan in place to be able to say you've already bought this here or you already bought that there. It doesn't happen with that. Now that means that people have to be self-ruling, and people are
well,
not
thank
always
God cannabis. Thank God nobody's going to die from cannabis. And we know that, Gary, I came upon a whole new, I think you and I might have discussed this, or it might have been in the green room. I get so confused these days as per various conversations, but I'm sick of the term overdose. Okay. When it comes to discussing cannabis, you can have a cannabinoid overexposure. Okay. Cannabis overexposures, okay, are uncomfortable. Okay, it may lead you to the ER, which is why I never saw one, because there are no 5-year-olds ever going to smoke a joint. Okay, but they'll find their parents' gummies, not the fault of the gummy, but the fault of the parent. Okay,
absolutely.
And no newbie to cannabis, doobie one in my clinic, of course, will ever eat an entire pan full of brownies as their first exposure to cannabinoids. They're going to eat 1 brownie, have a joint with their friends. And if they don't like it, then it's going to wear off in an hour or so. Brownie maybe a little longer, but nobody's going to end up in the ER. That's why I never saw it. But now a newbie can, through various venues, be it sophisticated CBD store, smoke shop, God forbid, gas station, also MMTC without a good doctor visit, with education. So Senator Simon can walk in, okay, to a facility, it was a hemp store, and be advised to buy a product that we still don't know what it was, Gary, right? We don't know if it was a 5 milligram, 10 milligram, 25 milligram, 50 milligram. He said it was Delta 8, and maybe it was a, hemp-derived Delta 9, who knows? But that newbie can walk into an MMTC also and end up with an overexposure to cannabinoids and end up in somebody's ER. So the beauty of the products of today that help so many patients that we know also do end up some people in the ER, but they don't die. And they have an overexposure to cannabinoids. They get a $5,000 ER bill. God forbid, they're not going to go to the ICU and get a tube down their throat. Okay. And I tell you, Gary, I plan on utilizing this period of time with all this publicity that we're going to see over oh, by the way, it's 210 days from yesterday, the election. And how do I know that? Because I heard it on Morning Joe this morning, 209 days. And of course, we do our research at 210 days. I've been telling my patients for the past week, the next time I talk to them, I'll be talking to them at a very different time in America.
Yeah.
We didn't start with any political discourse today, but we could have another green room, entirely about that, But so yeah, we got 5 minutes. So how do you see the campaign going? And please bring up other misinformation type of things so that we can clarify. Because what I love about you guys on the rotation, and I'm going to call you out to the positive again, is that you're not telling anybody how to vote.
No.
You just want to make sure they have the information appropriately so they can make the right decision, right? And how I'm going to vote, I believe I'm going to vote for it. A lot of people are surprised by that. In my doctor group last night, there were a lot of people surprised about that because doctors are afraid, of the impact on their practice. And
Well, I can tell you that if it does go through, we're going to have a lot of legislative work to do to make certain it gets steered in the right direction. Because we have a lot of things we have to do, one of which is protecting the medical market. We have to make certain the medical market is secure. And I can tell you for a fact that, guys, if you have your medical card right now, it's best to keep it. And it's best because, number one, it'll be a hell of a lot cheaper because there will be an excise tax that the growers have on them that they're going to pass on to you. And you're going to have an ad valorem tax that you're going to have to pay. So you'd be surprised you're going to have to pay a sales tax of approximately 20 or 30%, which is not unusual across the country. Medical patients, not so much. And secondly, if we can get this done right, medical patients will have the education, not just behind the counter, but in front of the counter buying it, but behind the counter. We have to make certain that our bud tenders are educated. Again, even just the hemp guy, Senator Simon, none of those bud tenders ever told that knew what products they had would help him sleep and what would make certain he didn't sleep. There's a difference between
or what is past usage, right? Or what is past usage history of cannabis was, that's critical. And thank you for bringing up the whole thing about the, bud tender, med tender, worker behind the window, whatever you want to call them. And I respect them, but they do need the best of education. What I worry about, Gary, is all the citizens coming in through the legal adult use side. I think you and I did discuss this because it's kind of esoteric. And it depends. Listen, can they create an entirely new agency to regulate legal adult use that's not the OMU and is not ag?
Yeah, actually, they're considering putting it through the Department of Business and Regulation, which is where it should be, actually. Because
I
it's
think
not
that's what
medical
Ohio.
use. Yeah, it should be in regulated businesses.
I think that's what Ohio did. But my point is that what I tell everybody is if you have your card, keep it. If you have friends that are cannabis consumers that are going to vote for this constitutional amendment, they should get their card beforehand as almost an insurance policy, okay, that they're going to end up on the right side of the consumer, right, market when everything settles down. Gary, listen, here's my second reason for what I like to call my hashtag Get Your Card Florida campaign. And you'll appreciate this, I think, more than almost anybody, because you've been around forever. Can you imagine? No, seriously. And I love your beard, by the way. You're getting ready for Passover, I think. Or did we have Passover already? Yeah, I know you look great.
I have my reclining chair.
Exactly. Can you imagine if we could grow this program from 850,000 to 1.5 million between now and the vote?
That would be wonderful because right now
it would show them the importance of safety and education, that we're taking it seriously. But I think it would also almost ensure that the MMTCs would stay medical, because the MMTCs would have a lot of motivation to make sure they're putting out those quality medical products. Here's the thing. It's not just flour anymore. It's the quality edibles, the gummies, the cookies, the chocolates. That's what patients want. And I think those are going to be better on the medical side, and absolutely cheaper on the medical side. And so to me, if you have your card, keep it. Of course, But if you don't have your card yet and you're going to be a cannabis consumer, get your card. You can always give it up in a couple of years if everything shakes down in a way you and I don't expect, with a vigorous consumer, positive, low taxed, great product quality. They may do that, but I doubt it. But my point is, and I'm interested in one last point because we're going to wrap it up. We've seen it in other states. They may tighten up medical as they establish this legal adult use market, because I've had them convinced up in Tallahassee, and Rep Roach told me this himself, that, Dr. Berry, you were one of the ones that convinced us that this was a safety issue on the medical side, that you have the snowbirds coming down for season. You have people coming from other states. You have cannabis consumers that don't want fentanyl exposure, that don't want mold, fungi, this, that. If you're a consumer that knows you want, sativa, indica labels, research, testing, all of that. You convinced us on that, but now here's a legal adult use market over there, and we want our tax money, right? So to me, you have to follow the money. And I'm not saying that anybody's talked to me about this, and I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it could, and it's happened in other states. We have similar, likewise, or as comparable, that it's allowed me to put a lot of people into the program that the state hasn't wanted in the program, but they can't argue with the safety, side of it. So do you think that there's possibility they may actually tighten up the medical side to drive more people over to the other side, yet grandfather in everybody that's already in the program?
That's a possibility. I think it's important to remember that medical markets are regulated because we're talking about a medical use, and medical use needs to have some kind of regulation to it because of the fact you're taking care of a medical use, a medical need, and you can't just take aspirin and expect it to take care of a cold entirely. You have to have the right medicine for the right symptom, that kind of situation. Unless you're doing that, you don't have it. Now, in the realm of be careful what you wish for, we have been pushing from day one, starting with talking about Charlotte Fidgey and all that bit, that this has to be there for the patients. We have had all these patients who've come to Tallahassee and explained what symptoms they had and how cannabis actually helped them. That's going to go away as an argument when we're talking about how to properly take care of the adult use market. And so we can't make that argument anymore, that it has to be done medically. So that's going to push things back towards the medical folks, I think, in a lot of ways, because that's frightening to think about when you don't have that argument anymore for any of those reasons.
For sure. But, cannabis has always been medicinal, Gary. And, the plant is the plant. We have our endocannabinoid system, that matches it. And, Tommy Chong would be the most famous, to say that it's all medical. But, in the dicey waters of 2024, listen, citizens look for the best ways to navigate through, and, anxiety can be categorized in a lot of different ways. And, I have patients day after day after day tell me that they avoid alcohol, obviously, because of cannabis. So I don't know, it's going to be an interesting campaign season, interesting debate. Thank you so much for clarifying, some of these things. And listen, we'll talk again. I do want to give once again a shout out to your Sunday show, The Rotation with the guys. And, we'll see you soon. This weekend, I know Suncoast Normal's having an event. Want to give one last shout out about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the 14th, we're having our best blunt in the Bay contest, it was just some basic fun to allow folks to go ahead and show off their rolling skills and see if it doesn't look like a Brock's candy or if it actually looks like a pre-roll like we used to do back in the day. And it's basically a fundraiser so that we have the funds just to be able to move our legislation forward and help the regulators without being lobbyists, essentially.
Yep. And that's what you guys do, and you do great work. So, and that's in St. Petersburg?
That is in
it's in Chillum in Ybor, right?
Absolutely.
Carlos's place, great. All right, Gary, thanks for joining us. Everybody, we'll see you next week on the Green Room. And listen, like I said, we'll be having these pretty much every week all the way through the campaign season. And, it'll be interesting to see the rallies and all that. I think this first, event that you guys are having would be the first of those. So it'll be interesting to see what the attitude and the vigor of the crowd is. That's for sure.
Absolutely. Have a safe 420, guys.